All right, Math 3, here is the last part of that trig review. Okay, hopefully you tried it on your own first, but we are going to fill these out. Okay, first we're going to focus on the 45-degree angle. Okay, so we need the sine, the cosine, the tangent, the cosecant, secant, and cotangent. So here's our workspace. Now remember our trig ratios right here and their reciprocals. That's what we're using. So doesn't matter what angle we're using here because they're both 45. So sine, opposite over hypotenuse. So for the sine of 45 degrees, we get square root of 2 over 1. Okay, the opposite, the hypotenuse. To simplify that, we simply get rid of the 1. So the sine of 45 degrees is square root of 2 over 2. What about the cosine? Well, cosine, the adjacent is the same thing. So wouldn't it be the same thing? Yeah, square root of 2 over 2. Okay, the tangent now, tangent of 45 degrees is opposite, square root of 2 over 2, over the adjacent, square root of 2 over 2. Which same thing on top and bottom, we simplify that to 1. So in other words, tangent of 45 degrees is 1. Okay, so sine and cosine are the same, square root of 2 over 2. Tangent is 1. Okay, now let's try the cosecant. So cosecant now is the opposite, so the hypotenuse is on the top and the square root of 2 over 2 is on the bottom. Okay, notice that for our secant, hypotenuse over adjacent, it's going to be the same thing because they're both reciprocals of these ones. Okay. Now you could also realize it's a reciprocal, so I could just say, well, let's flip that to 2 over the square root of 2, which is what this will eventually be, right? 1 divided by square root of 2 over 2. We times and get the reciprocal. So there's two ways you could do it. Okay. Now, which would help you out with cotangent, because cotangent is going to be the same thing over itself. So the reciprocal of 1 is also 1. Okay, now for these ones, we end up with 2 square roots of 2, regardless of how you got it. We can't have the radical on the bottom, so we times by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. Okay, those become 2, and 2 square roots of 2. 2's cancel, we're just left with the square root of 2 as our answer. Kind of weird how that works out, huh? So square root of 2 and square root of 2, because they're the same. So there's the first part of it. Okay, now let's take a look at our 30 degrees. Okay, so we can write this here, square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, 1, square root of 2, square root of 2, and 1. Okay, so now we're using our 30-90 triangle. Let's start out with the 30 though. Okay, so the 30, the opposite is 1/2, adjacent is square root of 3 over 2, hypotenuse is 1. Okay, so if we look at this one, for sine, opposite over hypotenuse, so sine of 45 degrees, opposite is 1/2 over hypotenuse is 1. That's easy, right? It's just 1/2. Now you may say, well, that's what our cosine is going to be, but let's double check it. Oh, why did I put 45? That's 30. So cosine of 30 degrees now would be the adjacent, square root of 3 over 2, over the hypotenuse, which is over 1. So that would simplify to square root of 3 over 2. So sine of 30 is 1/2. Cosine is square root of 3 over 2. Let's try tangent. Tangent of 30 degrees is opposite, 1/2, over adjacent, square root of 3 over 2. Now we rewrite it as a division, realizing we can't divide by fractions, so I times by the reciprocal. The 2's cancel, so I'm left with 1 over square root of 3, which, if I simplify, gives me square root of 3 over 3 for tangent. Okay, now knowing our reciprocals, cosecant is a reciprocal, so what's reciprocal of 1 over 2? It's 2 over 1. So it would be 2. Okay, the cosine would be 2 over square roots of 3, which we'd times by square root of 3 over square root of 3. We'd end up with 2 square roots of 3 over 3. Can't simplify that, so 2 square roots of 3 over 3. Okay, could we have done it the other way? Yeah, I could have went for secant. I could have said the hypotenuse of 1 over the adjacent square root of 3 over 2. We would have times by the reciprocal, and we would have ended up in the same boat. Okay, now tangent, reciprocal of that would be, the cotangent would be 3 over square roots of 3. Okay, because that would be up here, that would be down here. Okay, we'd flip those. So that would be square root of 3. That would be 1. And we'd end up, that might be easier to do it that way, right? Because the 2's would still cancel out, but we left with the square root of 3 over 1. Which, if we do this, we get the same thing. 3 square roots of 3. The 3's cancel out, so we're left with the square root of 3 for the cotangent. Okay? Now let's do the 60 degrees. So now we're based off the 60 degree angle. So now this is the opposite, this is the adjacent, 1 is still the hypotenuse. So the sine of 60 degrees now is square root of 3 over 2 over 1, which we simplified as square root of 3 over 2. And the cosine of 60 degrees equals the adjacent side 1/2 over the hypotenuse 1, which we simplified to 1/2. Well, what do we notice there? So square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2. Well, they just flopped, which makes sense because these are the different angles which only change those two sides. Okay, so as the angle changes with the function, those change. So how is that going to affect our inverse? So do we suppose these are going to be flopped? Well, let's try it. Okay, cosecant of 60 degrees would be the hypotenuse over the opposite, square root of 3 over 2. 1 divided by square root of 3 over 2, so we make it 1 times 2 over square root of 3. So times by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3, that becomes 3. That stays 2 square roots of 3. Okay, if we get the reciprocal of this, it's 2 over 1. So yeah, 2 down here, 2 square roots of 3 over 3. But now how is it going to affect the tangent and the cotangent? Okay, so the tangent of 60 degrees would be the opposite, square root of 3 over 2, divided by 1/2. So square root of 3 over 2 divided by 1/2, we simplify square root of 3 over 2 times 2 over 1. 2's cancel, square root of 3 over 1 just becomes the square root of 3, which is what cotangent was. So if we flip that, the cotangent of 60 degrees is probably going to be the square root of 3 over 3. Okay, we could find the reciprocal, 1 over the square root of 3 times square root of 3, and we're going to end up with that. So there we go, guys. Those are our trig ratios for those special right triangle degrees. Very important. We will be using these further to help us out with the stuff that we're going over. Hopefully you were able to figure out a lot of this on your own, because if so, that's going to be very beneficial to you. If not, I guess you got them now, and hopefully you'll be able to use them well.